This is the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.
Another week of the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show on your television. Mike Leslie, Jonah Javad here with you once again. The college football playoff field is set. SMU indeed in. How about that?
They got it right. We've got the next 30 minutes to discuss this, but let's just say they got it right. I was going to go on a rant had they not gotten in, but there's a whole lot of I know all of our Alabama fans in DFW are fired up tonight. Let's get to what's on the show.
Here's What's on the Show, sponsored by NFM.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, SMU is into the college football playoff. Alabama left out. Did the committee get it right? Plus, we'll break down the bracket, the best games, potential matchups down the road, and can the Texas Longhorns be the last one standing this year? Mike, that is what's on the show. Who's on the show?
On the show today, we have Sean Bass from The Ticket. Do we have either of them? Right now on the show is just Jonah Javad.
It's just going to be me.
It's just Jonah.
Hey, actually,
until 11:30.
Until we get this corrected, let's just give a shout out to the team of interest
here.
There
we go. Okay, so now on the show today, Sean Bass of The Ticket, who is now Sean Bass and Mike Leslie for the moment. I like that. That's just kind of slide back and forth. But also on the show is Kansas alum Mac Engel, and I'd like to just yield the floor for a moment before we get into the college football playoff at all to our Missouri alum, Jonah Javad.
Well, I got word that Mac was late to get logging on, and that's why we had these technical issues. You know, I was wondering if he heard that I was going to be on the show and was concerned that there might be some gloating involved. Indeed, there is. How about those unranked Mizzou Tigers taking down Mac's #1 ranked Kansas Jayhawks? Poor guy. I'm amazed that he made it onto the show. Thanks for figuring out your technology, Mac. Welcome.
I think, hey, there I am.
You'll be glad
I am no longer Sean Bass.
Like
We've got all four of us.
If you give a monkey enough time, he can write the classics. And if you give Missouri enough time, it can eventually beat Kansas in basketball. So congratulations. You got your one in a century. Way to go.
Thank you, bud.
So Mizzou takes down Kansas, but we're not here to talk about college basketball. It is a huge day for college football here in the state of Texas. SMU, gentlemen, is in. Alabama left out. Sean Bass, let's come to you first since you've been kind of wading through all the Kansas-Mizzou of it all. What do you think of the committee's decision to put the Ponies in?
I think they got it right. They got it right because SMU has been a fantastic team all season. And look, if Alabama didn't get housed by Oklahoma 24-3, they're probably in. If Alabama didn't lose to a pair of 6 lost teams this year, they're probably in. And honestly, you could make an argument that Alabama wasn't even playing the best football in the SEC at the time heading into this whole discussion. Really, South Carolina's had the best form of late. Yeah. But all SMU did was lose a tight home game to a BYU team that was ranked in the top 10 for the bulk of the season. And they took Clemson to the very wire, which honestly, if they don't have a special teams gap, they might win that game in overtime. So I think that justice was served by the committee.
Mac, how about you? What do you think?
Totally agree. I agree with everything Sean just said. I don't know, all this whining that the SEC is doing and all this complaining that Nick Saban and Alabama are participating. It's ridiculous. You talk about strength of schedule, and we need to rethink about how we do our scheduling. You lost at Vanderbilt. You lost at Oklahoma. 2 very bad teams. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. This is not some legacy deal. And that's exactly what they're campaigning on. Is this the idea that, well, our teams in the past, this is about this season, and SMU played its way into this bracket. This is not a playoff. It's an invitational. And by any metric, SMU deserved to be in this. They deserved they deserved an invite, and I'm thrilled that they're there.
The point that you made about legacy is, to me, the biggest thing here, because that is what Alabama is leaning on in all of these discussions is, but we're Alabama. We're Alabama. We're Alabama. It's the SEC. What did you do in 2024? In 2024, you lost to Vanderbilt, and you went to Oklahoma and lost 24-3 against a team that needed to win that game just to be bowl eligible. No, you're not a playoff team. Jonah, I know you're preaching the same song here, but it's just the fact that this was this much of a discussion is a bit mind-numbing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any other school across the name that's not Alabama, this isn't even a discussion. It's just because of what that name carries. Also, as it relates to the Roll Tide, if Nick Saban was still the head coach of Alabama, I do wonder, maybe they would have got the benefit of the doubt, but this is a new Alabama era, a new regime, and I do wonder if that played part of a role in it. Because leaving out Nick Saban would have been a lot more tough for, I think, college football fans to stomach, or at least Alabama fans.
Yeah, let's step aside for a moment. We're having one thing going wrong. We're gonna step aside for just a second. We'll come back with more of this discussion because that's a great question about whether or not Saban would have been left out. More of that after this on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show.
Today's headlines, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers.
All right, so before my audio went awry there, this was the point I wanted to make. Alabama, if Nick Saban was the head coach of the team still, I do wonder if that would have affected the committee's decision. Because Nick Saban, we know how much he means in terms of that Alabama legacy. I'm not so sure that they would have left Alabama out had Saban been the head coach.
What do you guys think? I mean, it's a fair question, but I do think going back to exactly what Max said, it's not about legacy. It shouldn't anyway be about legacy. It should be what you did this year. So in some way that feels just that, no, we're judging you based on Kalen DeBoer's your head coach, not Nick Saban. What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, if Kalen DeBoer didn't lose 3 games, Alabama would be there. Now, if Nick Saban were still the head coach, there's a good chance Bama doesn't lose 3 games. Now, I understand he's got this, aura about him, and he's doing a fantastic job on College Game Day now, but 3 losses is 3 losses. I think it doesn't matter what year Nick Saban was head coach. If they lose 3 games, they're not getting to a playoff, a BCS, what have you.
Mac, how about you?
You brought that up, and I was fascinated because it didn't really occur to me that had you introduced that personality into this dynamic, which is on the surface ridiculous, how legitimate it is of a point. Because if you put that guy on the sideline with that resume, as intimidating as he is, and then you say, yeah, sorry, you're not in, that would have been a hard no. I don't know if they would have done it. It's ridiculous. The record should be the record, and it doesn't matter who's standing on the sideline. But Saban was a different beast. He's not there, but if he was, I got to tell you, I think they would have. First of all, they wouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt. But let's just play it out.
Lost to OU either.
Nick Saban is the coach of that team with 3 losses. Yeah, I think they're in. I don't know who's out, but I think they're in.
Because the other factor here is, and all of these coaches do it because they know they have to, they politic their way through the final month of the college football season and try and make their arguments. Saban probably would have made a better argument that would have been more compelling to the committee about the schedule that they faced, about stacking up these games and one after all the arguments he was making on the broadcast today. He would have been making that case for Alabama all through the last 3 or 4 weeks to try and make sure that they were being viewed the way that he would want the committee to view them. And I think credit goes to Rhett Lashley in that regard as well, because he made a really good point this week to the committee to chew on. Hey, if we lose and you bump us out of this thing, what does that leave for conference championship games in the future? That was a great point for Rhett Lashley to make and a really good nugget to plant in the heads of the committee. Let's get into the Texas of it all, because they deserve some run here. Even though them getting into the field was much more of a foregone conclusion, they had a terrific season as well. What do you guys make of, and maybe Jonah, I'll come to you to start here, the fact that they're in as the 5 seed, and it seems like they've got a really good path potentially all the way to the championship.
Yeah, honestly, I think their toughest matchup is off the top against Clemson. I mean, Clemson has looked pretty good the last couple of months. And should they get past Clemson, Texas would face Arizona State. Listen, I get that you get one of the top 4 seeds by winning your conference championship. I'm not so sure about the Sun Devils against the Longhorns, but that's what this whole 12-team playoff is all about. There's a whole lot we just don't know, and we're going to learn over the next few weeks. A lot of these teams probably deserve more respect than we're giving them right now.
Sean Bass, they're going to play the 16th team in the rankings, the 12th team in the rankings, their first 2 games out of the gates, Texas, if they win against Clemson. That's a pretty cushy path.
Yeah, losing to Georgia wasn't the worst thing, huh? I mean,
Yeah.
Texas, their defense is good enough to win a championship. Now, whether Quinn Ewers can stay consistent enough with, putting quarter to quarter together, I still don't know, because sometimes he looks brilliant. Sometimes he doesn't look like he should be a first-round pick, but they got really lucky to, I guess, lose to Georgia in the SEC title game the way they did, because their path is much easier than Georgia's.
And if they win those 2 games, by the way, Mac Engel, I'll come to you with this. They basically host the Cotton Bowl against Oregon in a semifinal.
That would be an amazing game. The committee took care of UT. You can say why. You can theorize a million different ways why they did, but Texas is a top 5 team. I think Sean hit on it. The defense is outstanding. That's the best defense we've seen at Texas since probably the team that lost in the national title game under Mac Brown. It doesn't say a whole lot, but they've got NFL players all over that defensive line for the first time in a long time. But my big question about UT comes down to what Sean mentioned, which is, what is Quinn Ewers? You see him at times where he looks so good, and other times where it makes you wonder if he's healthy. And the one consistent problem that Quinn has had since he walked through the door at Austin is a clean bill of health. He's a young guy. This guy's billed as a first-round draft pick, but he just can't stay healthy. I don't know if he's healthy now, but with the time off, this is about as healthy as he's going to get, and it is set up for Texas to go to the title game. I don't know if they're better than Oregon. Oregon is really, really good, but you never know. But to me, this is going to come down to whether or not Quinn can be the passer that Texas needs him to be in those situations. They're not going to go to Arch Manning. That much is decided. It's a question of, can Quinn make those passes consistently against top-tier competition? He's going to get the chance, but to me, it is all set up for Texas to go all the way. I don't know if they will, because I think the question comes down to, can the QB make those plays?
Running out of time in this segment. One last question to get out there for y'all. The non-Texas SMU game that you're looking forward to most in the first round?
For me, it's Notre Dame and Indiana. Just a couple of in-state rivals. I think Notre Dame is low-key, a real threat to maybe make a run to the semifinals, heck, even the final. They've been just destroying teams ever since losing to Northern Illinois. They have a great ground game, and they have a defense that has a lot of grit and they create a lot of takeaways. They get a lot of pressure. I think that Notre Dame is low-key. Even though they're a big brand name, they could actually make a run here.
Mac, how about you?
For me, I grew up in Indiana. So if you would have told me, 12-year-old me, that in 2024, the Indiana Hoosiers football program, one of the worst in the last 50 years, with all due respect to the great Babe Laufenberg, would be in something called the playoff and playing Notre Dame, which at the time was at the top of college football, I couldn't have conceived it. I still can't conceive it. Indiana's roster is being paid less than $3 million in NIL money. Think about that for a second. There are a couple players on SEC teams making that much. So I think what Indiana has done this season is remarkable, and I would not put it past anybody that Indiana goes up to South Bend and knocks off Notre Dame. I think it's a phenomenal story, and as someone who grew up there, I love it. So that's the game that I've sunk my teeth into.
Juan Soto makes more in a week now than Indiana's NIL money. Ohio State, Tennessee is just so juicy. I love it. But really, I'm really looking forward to SMU and Penn State. I've long thought Penn State to be fraudulent every year, and I think this SMU team is legitimately good and showed that in the ACC championship. I would not be surprised if the Ponies make a run and take on Boise State in the next round.
I think it's absolutely possible, and if that does happen, man, that'll be. I do think that the Ohio State Tennessee though, because that's the great thing about this playoff. Now we're going to have hard data. All this conjecture. Oh, the SEC's better. The Big Ten's better. Now we get to actually know, and that's going to be really cool to see this play out in real time and get a feel for who was actually right in all of these discussions over the course of the last month. Before we hit a break, can we just acknowledge Sean Bass's sweater?
That's right.
Man, that is outstanding.
Yeah, man. It's Move the Stick St. Nick. He goes down the chimney and through the A-gap. Short yardage guy. More useful than Zeke these days.
Oh, no.
Sean Bass bringing it. I love it. That is so cool. More of the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. We're going to do the top 5 when we come back.
And now it's time for the top 5, sponsored by the Fort Worth Convention and Visitors Bureau.
All right, so we thought it might be fun to argue some more about college football, and I've got a list here of my top 5 college football players of the 21st century, and the fellas will then proceed to tell me if I am a genius or if I'm a genius. No notes. Without further ado, we begin with number 5. Quarterback Baker Mayfield, a Sooners legend in his own right, the 2017 Heisman winner, unanimous All-American, a first-team All-American. And, Sooners had a little brief period where they were not necessarily irrelevant, but he definitely brought the Sooners back to the national stage, followed by Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, etc. Baker gets the number 5 spot in my rankings. Gents.
Sean Bass, I hope Corby's watching.
Well, yeah, Baker's number 1 for Corby. Yeah, Baker's great. I don't know if he's like the best quarterback I've seen play college football, but what he meant for Oklahoma at that time, like you said, bringing the Sooners back to prominence after a slight down period. I'm curious to see what the other 4 are if you have Baker at 5.
For what it's worth, it was a very hard list to put together, and there's guys that I just legitimately forgot existed. Number 4, Tim Tebow. We got to put him in. He was like the definition of college football for a 2 to 3 year stretch. Won 2 national championships with the Gators. You remember one was with Chris Leak, and he kind of came in, and that was his, rise to the stage. Won the Heisman as well. Tebow's got to be a lock. Come on, right? Mac?
100%. Tim Tebow. In fact, you can make an argument Tim Tebow's number 1. He's not going to be number 1.
You
but I
took
think
the
what
words
we've
out of my
seen so
mouth,
far
yeah.
in this list, Jonah, is that you love white quarterbacks.
Next up, Chris Winkie. I'm joking. I'm joking. All right, number 3.
I do want to see who's number. Okay, all right.
Cam Newton. Shut it, Mac. All right. Of course, the quarterback for Auburn, 2010 Heisman winner, national champion as well. Cam, to me, was another no-brainer. A lot of these were no-brainers. It's just really hard to pick 5. Mike, your thoughts, Cam? Yes?
Trying to pick 5 is an impossible task, I grant you. Yes, Cam Newton and Tim Tebow definitely belong on this list. I think both of them could potentially go higher. I'm curious to see who you put at 2 and 1, but Mac took the words right out of my mouth. I think Tim Tebow might be 1.
Well, you got to remember, I'm 34 years old right now. College football to me, at its core, was that mid 2010s, right? So number 2 should come as no surprise. We're going Vince Young, quarterback for Texas.
Number 2 is Vince Young.
I think I know where he's going.
Number 2 is Vince Young, national champion. I mean, he was awesome in that national championship game. Sean, I don't know. Mac seems to disagree. He thinks he should be 1. I don't know what your thought is here, Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Mac.
I can't think of a player in this century who put a team on his back and won a game the way he did. And not just won a game. I mean, he beat one of the best teams in college football in the last 30 years. That USC team was loaded. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to Cowboys players who had played against Vince Young when he was at Texas, and they said they had never seen him. It was 1 on 11. And to me, as great as Tim, all these other guys, this is a really hard argument, and I'll be fascinated to hear your number 1. But to me, what Vince did that season when UT won the national championship, not only, he should have won the Heisman, that's fine, but in my mind, he was the most significant, impactful college player that we've seen this century by a comfortable margin.
And it wasn't just Reggie Bush and Leinart and Lindale White. It was a whole USC defensive dudes, NFL players. That was. I'm curious to see who you have at number 1 now.
All right, well,
I think I know where he's going with number 1, and I think Mac will like this if I know where he's going.
All right, well, we're going to do a little guessing here. Each of you are going to get a shot. You can just say the name, and then I'll reveal it once you all go. So, Mac, you guess first, then Sean, then Mike.
This is a no-brainer. Kansas cornerback Aqib Talib.
Todd Reesing.
Todd Reesing. I'm fine. Either 1 or 1A.
Sean, go ahead.
According to your T-shirt, it's probably like Drew Lock or Blaine Gabbert or some spare like that.
Ooh, Brad Smith, perhaps?
Yeah.
All right, Mike.
Bengals fans going Joe Burrow.
Oh, another great one. I was thinking Joe Burrow, maybe Johnny.
You didn't go Joe Burrow? Who is it then?
See, Joe Burrow had 2 awesome receivers to throw to, and I thought that was a little cheap. We're going Reggie Bush!
Oh, okay.
We're going Reggie Bush. How could we forget Reggie Bush? He had one of the plays of the decade, and he was just unbelievably fun to watch at all. In every second, every game, every time he touched the ball, he was a threat to score. To me, he was kind of like the essence of college football of that time. And you talk about that great USC team that went to those back-to-back national championships. I know Leinart was awesome, but Reggie Bush was the compelling reason to watch.
The moment that you revealed Reggie Bush, my IFB went insane and started. I thought it was Max screaming. I thought it was Max reacting to
I didn't even say anything. I don't have
I
words.
mean, it is shrill in my ear right now. It's still
Delete
going.
your account. How is Johnny Manziel not on your list?
Exactly. I was
Like, what do
actually
you
debating
do?
maybe
Like,
Manziel
Jonah,
for
I don't mean to
5.
sound, Mike, I don't mean to sound disrespectful to your colleague, and you don't need to tell him, like, I don't know what he does. Like, he just brings nothing. It's
Terrible.
awful.
It's that Mizzou journalism education, Max.
It's like, right, what a disgrace. Love you, Jonah, though. Great guy.
I mean, Johnny football over Baker, right? I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
Come on.
Probably. In retrospect, you're probably right. All right, Mike, send us to break.
I'm flying completely
Thank
blind.
you.
I can't hear anything that Mac or Sean are saying right now. We'll be back after this with more of the Ultimate Dallas Sports
Thank you,
Show.
Mac and Sean, for being
Thank
good
you both.
sports. All right, Mike's got a final word.
It's happening again. This has been a really fun show. We got about 20 seconds left. All I'm going to say is this. Cowboys, Bengals tomorrow night, Monday Night Football. If there's any sliver of a chance for this team to be part of the playoff conversation, it has to start with a win tomorrow. If they win tomorrow, it almost kind of starts to feel real because you can beat Tampa, you can beat Carolina.
Don't do this, Mike. Don't do this.
Listen, it's not happening.
Don't do this.
Even if they're 8-7 in 3 weeks, it's not happening.
Don't do this.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're going to try and make this all work better next week.
Bye-bye.
This has been the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.